Hey there, I'm Souldapop. I make videos about mechanics and team building in Genshin. This is not one of those videos. You see, I don't look at lore and gameplay of Genshin as mutually exclusive things. I know, shocking, given the discourse surrounding the game, you'd think it's almost impossible for the two sides to mix, but here I am. The lore and characters are what got me into the game. To me, it's just as interesting and engaging as the danker things going on under the hood. So today, I thought I'd shake things up a bit because the recent Fontaine trailer and Ashikai's recent video making predictions about the lore using chessboards and the Winter Nights Lazo teaser got a few gears turning in my head because in addition to Genshin and Diablo mechanics and lore, I find chess history to be profoundly interesting. For those that aren't aware, it goes like this. The chessboard in the Winter's Night Lazo teaser features a board state from a very important series of games in chess history, Kasparov vs. Deep Blue. The board state in question is from the first game in the first set of games. Kasparov played black and the chess program Deep Blue played white. In move 35 of the first game in the first set, the white knight takes the black pawn that represents Senora. The board state shown in the teaser is from the final moves of the game, which resulted in a loss for Kasparov. Through context in the trailer of the knight taking the pawn, one of Senora's butterflies landing on said pawn, Pierro's comment that checkmate is not where the game ends, the white pieces moving on their own, and the fact that he's playing from the black side of the chessboard, it's pretty reasonable to assume he's playing as black. That hasn't really been up for debate. It kind of goes without saying, but it's important to have this context for later. In Ashikai's theory, and most other people so far, she initially assumes that the Gnosis on the chessboard represents Zhongli and Venti. After all, they were theirs at some point. However, she also assumes that the events in Sumeru take place in Game 2 of the first series. There's a problem with that. Kasparov played white in that game. Why is that a problem? Well, if the Gnosis represents the Archons, why would Pierro suddenly be in control of them for the second game? In chess, you play as white, or you play as black. A white piece cannot become black. That's Go. Totally different game. So, either the Gnosis doesn't represent the Archons, or Pierro continues to play as black. Ashikai eventually reaches the conclusion that each Gnosis represents a king, assuming Nahida would also be the king in Game 2. And since you can't have two kings in one game, the Gnosis must be kings from different chess sets. There's a pretty obvious problem with that. There were two Gnosis on the board in the game we were shown during the Winter's Night trailer. Ashikai goes on to theorize that even though the Gnosis must be kings in different sets, they are simply used as placeholders for other sets on the board. But why? She claims that it resolves a lot of problems, but those problems are only problems because what's currently accepted in the lore community says they're problems. Here's where I start to reach a pretty stark disagreement in the current assumptions being made. None of the problems that have arisen are actually problems. They're all made on head-canon assumptions, like it doesn't make sense for the Electro-Gnosis to be a bishop because A is obviously a knight, and that means there have to be two Electro-Gnosis, or we lost in Sumeru, or there are only 7 Gnosis, or the Anemo-Gnosis has to be a queen because Venti has to represent a queen. That's all to say, the current problem with all the chess theories is that those creating them are creating problems to solve without a real logical basis to establish those problems. The pieces don't have to be placeholders if you don't assume they're all kings. They don't have to be all kings if you don't assume the Archons are all kings. They don't have to be different pieces than what they are if you don't assume they represent the Archons. Venti's piece can be a king if you don't assume it's a queen. A's piece can be a bishop if you don't assume she has to have a knight Gnosis. That piece was originally Makoto's. It's changed hands 4 times and hasn't changed from one piece to another. That's it. Pretty simple. There's one Electro Gnosis, it's a bishop, and it always has been. And Sumeru doesn't have to be game 2 if we don't assume they're only representing the first series of games. You see, there's something no one's telling you right now in these lore theories. Kasparov played Deep Blue in a series of 6 games. Twice. So it's not 6 games, it's 12. In the first series, Kasparov won. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense if Pierro is playing Kasparov. The Fatui win in the end? As much as y'all like to say you want the storytelling to be more mature, I think hell would break loose in the community if all the time and money invested from the players resulted in them losing in the end. However, what if we make an assumption ourselves? What if the logic we've already established answers the one actual problem, the Gnosis being white pieces? What if both the things that answered that question are true? Pierro never plays as white, and the pieces don't represent the Archons. Don't believe me? Well, let me show you what happened after the shown board state in Kasparov vs. Deep Blue Game 1. The rook takes the pawn, and Kasparov resigns. Wait, the Fatui did lose another pawn after Senora, didn't they? Scaramouche. But Zhongli didn't take him off the board. That doesn't make sense. So the rook can't represent Zhongli. We'll get back to that in a moment. Now, let's look at game 2. All 4 rooks are taken off the board by the end. Zhongli may have faked his death, but he's still kicking, and the Fatui know it. They're the ones that orchestrated it. Once again, the assumption that the pieces represent the Archons doesn't work. Even the assumption that the white Gnosis became a black Gnosis for this game doesn't work. All the rooks are gone. That's not all. There's one other fundamental problem. Game 2 can't represent Sumeru because the Fatui didn't win in Sumeru. It was a draw. They got the Gnosis, but according to Nahida, it was an equal trade, a draw. However, if Pierro only plays as black, we would look on to Game 3 for Sumeru instead. Game 3 ends in a draw. There's still a white rook on the board at the end of the game. It even lines up narratively. In the final move of the game, black makes a desperate attack on the pawn that causes an unwinnable endgame, just like how Dottore confronts Nahida face to face at the conclusion of Sumeru's main story. Now, this is where things get exciting. I'm about to predict the future. With Pierro playing as black solving all the logistical issues, including the ultimate victory, which goes to Deep Blue in the final game Kasparov played as black in the second series of games, also the final game ever between the two, that means we would look to Game 5 for Fontaine, which is the only loss Deep Blue ever had as white. Not only that, but Deep Blue had the chance to draw the game. Literally at the halfway point, move 23 of 47, Kasparov offered Deep Blue a draw, and Deep Blue declined. interesting. You know, I bet if there were anyone in the Fatui's side that would offer to work with the Traveler, it'd probably be Child, right? And the Traveler would definitely refuse that draw, but that couldn't happen. There's no way Child would show up in Fontaine. Oh. Coincidence? No. Precognition. Destiny, if you will. Child will offer to work with the Traveler. The Traveler will decline, and it will come back to bite them by the end. But there is still an unanswered question. If the pieces don't represent the Archons, who do they represent? I don't know. There are other groups in Teyvat with questionable allegiances that definitely don't align with the Fatui. We know of two at the moment, the Hex and Zirkel and the Abyss Order. Wait, we've only been shown two pieces on the board, so maybe. What do you think? Fight in the comments, but be respectful. Oh, and go check out Ashikai. She's awesome. Later.